So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Abraham Calhoun, the founder of PEACEWITH. We are a company dedicated to bringing peace to the workspace, and we do that primarily through one-on-one coaching with executive leaders and also providing staff workshops. I'll go over a list of all of our engagements where you can find us throughout the week. But the reason we are here today is for this one specific purpose, which is is work-life balance. So my goal for our this evening's free class is essentially to give you the spiritual basics of creating work-life balance in your own life. So to begin, I like to get us started thinking. So I just wanted to pose the question to the group. What does work-life balance mean to you? When the words come to mind, what are you thinking in your mind? Feel free to share in the chat, or you can access the Jamboard and share directly onto the Jamboard by grabbing one of these sticky notes here. And so this is like a cool interactive way, or you can also share in the chat or come off mute, whatever you would like to do. So yeah.
Um,
I see someone joined the Jamboard, but yeah.
I feel like work-life balance is working and having enough time to do like creative stuff or just like feeling like relaxed enough in your life to also have time to do nothing.
I love that. And time to do nothing. One of my favorite spiritual, I mean, I have so many favorite spiritual teachings, but one of my favorite comes out of Taoism, the whole concept of Wu Wei, which is like literally the art form of doing nothing, and being like water. I love that idea so much. So thanks for sharing. But we're going to move on and now actually dig into a little bit deeper and really define what work-life balance is. And the reality is you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? So I loved this. I love this definition from Rooney et al. It was a study where they looked at nurses and like how work-life balance correlated to their mental health and wellness. And this was the definition they used in their study. Work-life balance indicates an equilibrium between professional and personal commitments to improve overall satisfaction and fulfillment in life. So it's a little bit more technical, but ultimately it is kind of this idea of finding that equilibrium between the stuff that makes us money and the stuff that actually makes us happy and satisfied outside occupations. Now, in order to understand how to achieve work-life balance, we have to really also know what causes work-life balance. So in the organization, these are kind of like the top 5 aspects that cause an imbalance between work and life. The first one is culture of fear and management. So like this is that I know is running rampant in organizations across America right now is this culture of fear. And one of the best indicators of a culture of fear in an organization is that kind of language around if you're an employee and you're a superstar and you're already pulling your weight, you're hitting your marks, you are either hitting your marks or exceeding your marks. And then you get this ask of, oh, we just need you to do this one last thing, or you're not being a team player if you're not on like doing this with us. It's kind of this whole aspect of saying, if you're not going above and beyond and overstretching yourself for the rest of this organization, then you're not a team player. Like that is a classic case of culture of fear. I will say our last class that I taught called Working with That Person You Hate. It's on YouTube. You can watch it, and it goes all through a toxic workplace and what a culture of fear looks like for anyone who's also watching on YouTube right now. From there, the second organizational cause for a work-life imbalance is high work expectations. This is that classic concept of when you go in and you sign your offer letter, you're told here are all of the duties and responsibilities you're supposed to do. And then sometimes on that job offer, it says and anything else assigned to you. Yeah, if you were an employer or a manager or a business watching this, you need to take that off of your job descriptions immediately because it's just unfair. At the end of the day, when people sign that, what they're signing up for is what they're going to do. And if you're asking your employees to do anything else outside of that job description, there needs to be a formal meeting and a discussion around compensation and or task equilibrium, right? Like figuring out, okay, well, what's going to get cut in order for me to do these next things. From there, we look at lack of flexible working hours. Many businesses right now are telling people to come back into the office, which is, from my perspective, something that we don't necessarily need to be doing depending on the type of work and organization you're in. And you have incompetent coworkers. Like sometimes there are people who are working in the organization that just don't know what they're doing, and that can slow us down and or create more work for us. And finally, it's just the speed in which we are working, right? Especially in the American culture. I remember moving back from the Middle East and coming back to the United States, like the stress and the intensity that we put inside of the workplace to create that fast-paced work environment, it's ridiculous. We know psychologically there's no such thing as multitasking. Our brain literally cannot focus on multiple tasks at one time. What's actually happening is like a quick fluctuation between the neurons in our brains. So we need to slow down. Now, when we're looking at more personal of work-life imbalance, you, of course, lack of boundaries is probably one of the biggest things. It's that aspect of saying, if I say no, I'm going to be seen as this or X. It's like, okay, I'm telling you to say no all the time, but I am telling you to really start aware of where boundaries are and where you don't have boundaries when it comes to work and your time. The second biggest one is like working past work hours. And that's kind of connected to this lack of certainty in the self. Many people are overcompensating in their jobs on a daily basis because of a culture of fear or because of a toxic workplace. And that leads to them not actually trusting themselves, not actually feeling like that confidence that they should be feeling on a daily basis. And then finally, perfection consciousness. We all know that perfect is not a real thing. It doesn't actually exist. But really what we should be striving for is excellence, this constant evolution of getting better rather than like perfection. So that is kind of our causes of work-life balance. I want to pause here and see if there are any questions. There's no need for questions, but if there are, I always like to leave space. Awesome. Now, when you are experiencing an imbalance between work and life, it's coming from the organization. What you need to know are these few things. First one, you need to make the assessment, right? Like, is it me or is it the organization? Step one, know your position of power, right? You have to understand like where you are in the organization if you're trying to actually make change in your organization and really shift culture. So after you've kind of determined how much power do I actually have in this organization to make a large change? Am I a high up exec or am I an entry level position, right? Because determining your power is like the most important thing, because at the end of the day, you do need a lot of power in organizations in order to make the type of positive change that PEACEWITH is hoping to bring into the world. From there, you want to determine if you can be a change maker, right? So let's say I don't have low power and I don't have high power. Let's say I have like medium power in my organization. I want to start asking myself, what does it take of me to actually be a change maker, and what might be the repercussion of me trying to change culture and or push back on certain things, provide feedback? Because ultimately, when you go into wanting to change something, even if you're trying to change something for the good, you generally make some sort of enemies, or you're going to hit people who disagree with you along the way. And depending on where they are in the power structure, that could have serious repercussions. So it's just something to be mindful of. And then the third, if you determine, okay, yep, I'm going to go through with this, I think I have enough power to actually make change, then you want to develop your strategy, right? What does it actually look like for me to make this change? Who are the people that I need to have the conversations with? How should those conversations flow? What specific tactics am I actually going to be introducing into the organization? And just the last caveat here of dealing with organizational reasons is changing culture takes a lot of power. And culture fear is the main issue due to competition and so if you are not an individual who has a lot of power in your organization, but you are dealing with a lot of organizational reasons that are causing you an imbalance of work, then you need to leave. Like, that is the advice that I am giving people. Stop rewarding these negative and toxic workplaces with your time and effort. Do your best to find a job. Now, I understand that not everyone can just up and leave a position immediately. It takes time, it takes effort, but if you approach it with the right kind of consciousness, and that is really what this class is for this evening, is to give you the consciousness needed behind creating that work-life balance, then you can create the right exit strategy for you to get out of the organization. I'm going to pause here and see if there are questions or comments from the group. Feel free to say whatever you want to say or ask. Not necessary though. Super. So now we're gonna start getting into the meat of what I have for everyone this evening. So when we're actually dealing with more personal reasons of work-life balance, you'll find many classes and quizzes on YouTube that talk about scheduling and time management and mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I stand by all of those strategies. But for this evening's class, we're not really going to talk about a lot of those strategies because the reality is, if your mindset is not in the right place, then those strategies aren't even going to work for you. So my goal for this evening is almost like part one of work-life balance, which is making sure that you have the consciousness of work-life. Once you develop the right consciousness, then you're actually ready to start building around time blocking, setting appropriate boundaries, having the challenging and difficult conversations that you may need to have, and so on and so forth. So when we're dealing with personal reasons, one of the biggest challenges that we're faced with and that creates a lot of lack of balance in our lives is this idea of perfection consciousness. And it feels a lot like this. First and foremost, fear of mistakes can paralyze us. We get in this state where if I make a mistake on something, then I'm going to look bad, or people are going to think negative about me, like whatever it may be. We're creating all of these mind movies in our minds all times of the day that are continuing to stress us out. I'm going to be honest, just before this class, someone unsubscribed from my emailing list and it started to send a chain of negative thoughts and feelings and ideas in my mind. And I'm realizing, like, this is just a trick of the ego to make me feel less confident, to make me feel who I really am inside, which is this person that I want to be, like sharing wisdom with people. And so instead of me actually leaning into the thoughts of like, no one wants to listen, no one hears me, etc., I told myself, actually, I'm going to take the time and focus on this. So from there, you want to know the goal and the steps. So if you know the actual goal that you're trying to achieve, you then can break it down into smaller steps, and that will actually help you. And then from there, of course, take breaks and take leisure time. Super important. Now, one of the things that I'm going to challenge you to do over the next couple of days is think back to a previous mistake that you've made in a workspace. And I want you to ask yourself these questions. After you made the mistake, did you have a plan? Like a plan of action to make it better? How was it resolved? And did it cause discomfort or suffering? I think one of the biggest things that I'm realizing more and more is that people cannot determine between discomfort and suffering. And the easiest way I can tell you that is suffering is more aligned with trauma, abuse, emotional abuse, toxicity, toxic relationships, right? Whereas discomfort is trying to push ourselves a little bit more in certain areas that we might not be the best in. right? Like it is okay to be uncomfortable in the workplace. Part of work is growing and changing. But if you feel like you're suffering because of your workplace or because of how you're working, that's where we need to start changing the way. So mistakes often do cause discomfort, but they rarely cause intense suffering. So we need to figure out, in order to create balance in my life, first I need to know, is it the organization causing me an imbalance, or is it myself? Is it my own skills and practices? So I loved this quote here from Ayana Lupu and Myra Ruiz Castro. They're writers from the Harvard Business Review, and they explain that work-life balance is not something that we achieve, but rather it's something that we're constantly need to be assessing and evolving, i.e., there's no attachment to one singular idea. And so this is one of the next big spiritual consciousness things that I'm trying to express, is that we live, especially in the West, in such a dualist perspective. There is this, and there is this, and there is this, and there is this. You see it, and there is work, and there is life. At the end of the day, no thing really exists. And what do I mean by that is there's interdependence in all things. Things are constantly working together. And so when I was reading and doing research for this class, I really loved what these two people had to say. This idea that work-life balance is not a one-size-fits-all. It's a process. It's changing, it's evolving, and it's constantly moving. So if you yourself are attaching to one specific idea of work-life balance, you are going to find it more challenging to find that balance, because attachment is coming from the ego. Attachment is coming from trying to find the quickest possible solution rather than trying to find quality solutions. So what I tell people to do is, in order to determine if it's the workplace or if it's you, we first want to build intense confidence, strong certainty in the self. So the first question you ask yourselves in this assessment is, what makes my role, what makes me legitimate in my role, right? Did I earn this position in the right way? Do I actually have the qualifications to be in this role? And do people respect me in this role? It's very, very important. So if you answer yes to that question, then you want to move down to question 2. Do I have the facts and skills to support my performance? And that's like what we're talking about, is ultimately when you are getting your evaluations at the end of the year, your 6 months, maybe some organizations have 3 months evaluations, whatever it may be, are you hitting the mark and exceeding expectations? Because if you are, you shouldn't have anything to worry about, right? And then finally, the third question is, do I know my worth and do I share? Do people see me as a valuable part of this team? And the reality is, if you're answering yes to all 3 of these questions and you're still feeling intensely stressed out, that generally means it's the organization and it's not you, right? Now, if you're answering no to most of these questions, then there might need to be some self-reflection and self-work that is done. I'm going to pause here and make sure there are no questions or comments from the group.
Yeah, I feel like I often doubt myself constantly in the workplace, and I can never tell if it's them or if it's me.
Mm.
And I definitely tend to blame it on myself.
Yeah, I mean, and because naturally we do, right? I think especially when we're going up against a large organization, sometimes we do feel powerless. But the reason why I think these 3 questions really hit the nail on the head with like trying to determine whether it's an organizational issue or if it's not, it's because when you look at the first one, right? Like if you got your role in the right way and you have the respect that you deserve from people, you're generally going to have positive relationships with people in the workspace.
Mm.
Then the second one is when we move in. Now, if I look and I'm actually performing well in meeting the mark, like doing a good job, I have good evaluations, and I'm still feeling like intensely stressed out, then that might mean like there's actual extra stress coming from the organization, not necessarily me. And finally, it's like, do I know my worth and share, right? Like, am I a valued team member? If the answer is yes, and I'm still stressed out, then that might mean like there's something wrong with the organization. But if I can't confidently say, yes, I'm always there, I'm showing up for other people, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, then it might mean like, look, I've got to actually start to take into, like, I really got to do that inner work and really look inside.
Mm.
There's also something, sorry, did you have a comment
Oh no, I'm just agreeing.
okay, super. Well, I like it when people agree. Naturally, it's the Aries in me coming out. Um, so one here is I think I'm going into my role. I wasn't the most qualified, but after working there, I have learned so many new skills, right? And that might be where we're going back to that beginning is discomfort or suffering, right? Like in the beginning, there might be some discomfort, right? It's a little bit of doubt, but sometimes there can be positive doubt. There can be that self-doubt that says, okay, I do kind of doubt my skills in this one area. So maybe that's an area for me to pay attention to and like lean into more and develop my skills more in that area. Sorry, the chat's in my eyes. Got to move it down. There we go. Cool. Now, we're going to start to get into the actual spiritual consciousness now. So we've determined whether or not it's the organization or it's me. If it's the organization, the advice that I'm giving people is leave, get out, stop rewarding, don't give them your time. However, if you think that there might be some self-improvement involved, using the peace with process is what's going to help you best. And the first step of the peace with process really is quantum cause. It is this idea of seeing the bigger picture, getting outside of the self, getting a bird's eye view, or this idea of cause and effect, interdependence, right? All things are working together. And this is why, like I was saying just a second ago, there's really no such thing as work-life balance. Why? Because we don't just have work in life. We have life, and work is one aspect of our lives. So you'll see here in the wheel of life balance, you have one aspect called occupational wellness. However, you also have 7 other areas of wellness that we should be considering and thinking about. And what I have noticed happening with some people that I've worked with in the past is that they think a lot of their stress and unhappiness is coming from their job. But actually, when we do this assessment, we realize that no, wait, it's actually because your physical wellness and your environmental wellness are not where it needs to be. So it's not necessarily about the work, it's more about the geographical location you're in that's making you feel discomfort and unhappy, right? So this is why I like to look at life as a full spectrum rather than work and life. So I love this little activity here, and I'll show you really quick in the workbook what it can do. You'll all get the link to the workbook after this class, and you can kind of take it yourself. But if you want to, so you have it here, you have your wheel here, and to the left of the slice title, you'll see a scale from 1 to 10, right? So the numbers to the left are the measurement scale for that specific slice. So I would come on here. Oh, wait, I forgot. I can actually do it on Jamboard. So I would come on here. I want to grab my pen and I would say, okay, like, where am I in my intellectual wellness? Do I feel like I'm being intellectually stimulated on a constant basis in my life? Ultimately, like, if I'm honest with myself, I'm at about a 10 on intellectual wellness just because I'm constantly learning because I'm always putting classes together and assignments, right? Then I might come to my social wellness and say, do I feel like I have access to a community? Do I feel like I have friends? Do I feel like I have people in my life that are filling my cup? And the reality is, yes, I'm part of thriving communities. So I might give myself a 7 or an 8 in that one, right? And then what happens is after I fill in this entire wheel, I then can start connecting the dots, and it's going to give me a graph, a circle graph of kind of like what my life looks like. So the example here will come out looking a little like this, right? We can see when this individual did theirs, Their spiritual wellness was probably at about a 7. Their social wellness was probably about a 7. Their environmental wellness was at about a 5. So you can kind of start to see like what aspects of your life need more attention versus others. Are there any questions about this wheel of life balance? Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about value and purpose, because this, I think, is something that people don't think enough about as it relates to work, especially in the United States, where we have a culture of you just got to go to work, you got to make that money, you got to afford things, you know. And I remember I grew up with this consciousness of like, sometimes you just don't like work. Sometimes work sucks, and that's just what life is. And it's like, no, we do not hold that idea here. I believe that through assessing your value and understanding your life purpose, you can find a role and a career that is much more aligned with who you are meant to be internally. And ultimately, one of the main reasons people hate their jobs and feel stressed out all the time is because they're not focusing on understanding what their values are and what their purpose is and how it's interconnected with the role that they're doing. So I love this little trick here. In order to find what your soul's purpose is or what your life purpose is, my spiritual teachers taught me to list out your top 5 values first. So when I started to think about what are the things that I hold dear to my heart, what do I love in life, what do I find important in my life, the first one is proactivity. Like, I love this kind of idea of getting ahead of the challenge or restricting my reactive behavior so that I can actually understand more fully a better way about doing something. So I really, really value proactivity. The second one was spiritual development. Ever since I can remember, since I was like 6 or 7, I've always been a spiritual individual. My spirituality has always been important to me. It's always been a part of my life. From there, education. Education was super important to me. I love learning and I love teaching. From there, partnership is super important for me. I really, I wanted to be in a relationship my entire life. Now I'm in a very loving, beautiful relationship, which is great. But ultimately, at the end of the day, relationships and partnership is something that I really value. And of course, fun. Like at the end of the day, I want to be having fun. And yes, you can have fun at work. It's very important to have fun at work. And then finally, I'm gonna just call it like it is. I like to talk. I like to be in the front and center. And so recognition and influence was important for me. So after I kind of assessed, okay, here are my top 5 values. Wait, excuse me. Here are my top 5 values. I then want to move into my passions. So when I think about what my top 5 passions are, well, dancing. And what it like to define passion a little bit more fully, passion is something that gets you up and excited. Like, oh, I just want to jump up and down when I'm doing that. It makes me feel so full and excited. So dancing for me, teaching, I love teaching. It fills my cup. Nature, being outside, it's amazing. Peace building. I love really helping people find peace in their lives and peace with other people. Of course, helping others, sharing and giving. And then, of course, Judaism. Like, I'm very connected to my actual tradition as well. I really should have said Kabbalah, but ultimately they're the same thing for me personally. So now that I've got my passions and my values next to each other, I then want to ask myself, where is there alignment between these two? And like when I'm thinking about this, what might be an actual position or job career for me related to all of this? Now, I've spent years trying to find a specific job for me, and it was a little bit challenging because I am a unique individual. Most of us are unique. But I knew for me, my life's purpose really was to start this business, to start this mission of PEACEWITH. So really, when I come up with my purpose, it is to teach people how spirituality can help them build more peace in their lives. Like ultimately, simple sentence. So as you're doing this assessment yourself, you start with your top 5 values. Then you move to your top 5 passions. Then you're looking at synergy between the two and what kind of career might come out of all of those values and passions. And that's what helps you find your soul's purpose, what you're really meant to be doing here, not only spiritually, but also for work and for your job. Are there any questions on this slide or about using the peace process and quantum cause to create more happiness? Can I speak more on environmental wellness? Absolutely. So, environmental wellness. So we see here existing environments and climates that improve well-being take necessary time outdoors. So when I think about environmental wellness, I think about 2 aspects. The first aspect is where I'm actually located geographically. Does it serve my purpose? Does it serve what I'm trying to do in my life? So if I'm an honest person, so I'm going to be honest again. Sometimes I think to build my business and to build my career and to build the fulfillment that I'm wanting in my life, Richmond is a little bit more of a challenging environment for me to be in because the culture here, especially in the professional world, is a little bit more traditional, right? And therefore, it might not necessarily serve my needs and fill my cup as much as it should. So the first aspect is actually geographical location and where you're living. The second aspect of environmental wellness really is like, are you taking time to be outside? I remember teaching in New York City, a bunch of kids in Flatbush, and we went to a farm to pick pumpkins for them. And the moment we got off the bus, it was just like constant complaint after constant complaint, like being outside. Oh, the bugs. Oh, this. Oh, this. And I started to realize, like, wow, like Americans really are losing touch, especially if we're living in like big modern cities, like losing touch with human connection to the outdoors. I was recently reading this study about the frequencies that our body puts out and emits, and how having barefoot on the ground actually helps to balance and like channel energy in our bodies. And I just can't think that is like, it's so true. You really need to get outside. You really need to breathe fresh air. It's a part of inspiring us. It's a part of helping us live happier. So I always am trying to find ways to get outside at least once or twice a week, more than an hour, and like really spend time with my pup and feel the grass, feel the trees, get my hands dirty. I love to build like random stick forts in the woods. So that's something that like really gets me back to my primal roots, if you will. So I hope that answers your question around environmental wellness. Now, moving on to the next process or next step of the PEACEWITH process. After we've taken this snapshot and looked at the interdependence of our life and looked at all the different areas that we're feeling well, we then want to come to a deeper understanding of our desires and how we're using our desire in life. Both Buddhism and Kabbalah teach that desire is like a number 1 aspect of life. Now, they do approach it a little bit differently, I want to say. Buddhism is a little bit more about, not all aspects of Buddhism, but certain sects of Buddhism are very much about like getting rid of desire, whereas Kabbalah is much more like embrace desire, but understand there are different types of desires. So what you'll see here is on the graph, we have 3 different types of desires in general that we're feeling on a daily basis. One of those are distracting desires, desires that are taking us away from our goals, from our life's mission, from whatever we're trying to achieve in that day. Then we have the desire to restrict. This is kind of the ability to say no to distracting desire or no to negative desires. And then we have helpful desire. We have the kind of desire that's sometimes harder for us to cultivate, but if we do really lean into cultivating these types of desires, it's going to help us feel more fulfilled in the end of the day. So we want to be asking ourselves, how am I using my desire to create balance in my life? Am I actually using it to the best abilities that it can? So this graph here was this really, really amazing study. If you want the link to the source, I can get it. It's also linked in the work-life balance workbook that you'll all have access to after the class. But these psychologists looked at desire, and they looked at desire, how desire potentially gets in the way of people's goals, and whether or not they had the willpower to fight against desire that got in the way of their goals. So on the y-axis, what we see here is the conflict between desire and goal. So no conflict at all the way to 2.5. There's a strong conflict. So you'll notice with leisure oftentimes is conflicting with our goals. Our desire to have leisure is getting in the way of other larger goals that we may have. Now, the x-axis here at the bottom is showing the strength of the desire. So starting from a 3 all the way to a 5. So you can also see that the strength of this desire that we're feeling on a daily basis is more than a 4. So it's quite an intense desire that we're feeling. It's strong. The light red on the graphs signify people's ability to restrict and finish their goal, or the dark red stating, I gave into the desire and did not meet my goal. So if we're looking at leisure specifically, we know that it has a high conflict rate between goal and desire. And we know that it's strong. It's a really intense desire that we're feeling. But people, 85% of the time, were able to actually restrict that desire and finish the goal. And about 15% of the time, people are giving into that desire. Whereas if you look at social media use, which is not as strong of a desire as leisure is, but it gets in the way of people's goals about 20% of the time. So this is something that we should be thinking about as we're thinking about work-life balance. How many hours of the day are we spending on our phones at work rather than actually trying to stay focused on the task at hand? And so this is why I teach the consciousness of desire, understanding spectrum of desire, learning how to assess, how is my desire influencing me right now? Is it influencing me in a helpful way, or is it influencing me in a distracting way? And the more that I start to keep tabs on my desire, the better I'm going to be able to actually restrict it. And so that was the last thing that came out of this awesome study, was that they found that the people who practiced actually restricting those distracting desires and instead achieving their goal, they learned that it was like a muscle. They worked it out. It got stronger and stronger. And so their ability to restrict became better. Are there any questions about keeping tabs on our desire and using the spectrum of desire to really understand where we're being pulled throughout the day?
I don't know if I have a question necessarily, but this is like very eye-opening for me. Because I feel like I get down about like desires that I can't reach. And it's just like that feels like half the problem. Like, just like ruminating on that.
Yeah, so like when you mean like, okay, it's like a goal that I want to achieve, but I feel like there are things standing in the way, or more like a desire, like I have a desire to do more yoga, but I'm not like doing it as much.
I guess it's more like, I don't know, not to get like too personal, but like dating is something that I really enjoy, but like not allowing that, like if something's not happening for me right now, not, I feel like it can really like take over my brainscape, and then that becomes something that like kind of obstructs my goals, or it's like
Hmm.
accepting that like there's certain things not available to you is like huge for me.
Yeah, I mean, like, because you have an attachment to an idea in your mind, like of what something is
Yeah,
supposed to be like. So that's
exactly.
like the first thing is like kind of non-attachment, right? And like that was kind of going back to like towards the beginning is we have to understand that we're allowed to have goals, we're allowed to have expectations, but we also have to understand that the creator is at work in our lives too. So sometimes things aren't going to work out exactly as we want them to work out. But it doesn't mean we're not allowed to have those desires, because at the end of the day, your desire is a tool to help you become more fulfilled. So wanting to be in a relationship with someone or wanting partnership, whatever it may be, is say the desire. But if it's not working out the right way, what I'm hearing is there, it sounds like there's mind movies that are coming in. There's stories that you start to tell yourself about why this desire is getting unfulfilled. Is that a potential, is that correct? Or
Yeah, definitely.
right. So those mind movies are the thing that really is where you need to apply the desire to restrict, right? So it's not so much like not having the desire to be in a relationship, but actually there is the ego coming into play, creating these mind movies in your head. And what I would suggest is find a way that works best for you to restrict those negative thoughts, right? And I know it's really simple to say that. It's a lot harder in practice. But maybe what you do next time is the moment you start to feel that mind movie come up in your mind, or something negative about yourself related to not achieving a desire you want to get into, I just like to say like three positive things about myself to like get me outside of that thinking. It's natural. The next thing I would say is, okay, let's start assessing really what that desire looks like for you, right? If you are wanting to be in a relationship, really let's start to put together like what that looks like for you, and ask yourself like, what am I doing, the right kind of steps? Am I giving myself the right kind of behavior, like doing the right kind of behavior that I need to in these moments? You're right, this is a little bit more personal too, and so
Mhm.
this is where spirituality, right, starts to go from the general to the personal. And so in a one-on-one session or like a spiritual healing session, we would talk a little bit more specifically about that desire, and like I would start to unpack it a little bit more with you, if that makes sense. But I know you're probably not wanting to like spill all your business.
No, but I appreciate what you're saying because it's just like retooling basically your thought patterns. Like,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. And what I have come to find out is the more awareness that I have of how my desires are controlling me, the better I'm able to actually restrict in the moment and or change my strategy, pivot, do whatever I need to do in order to achieve the next step, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So we have here in the chat, my desire to sit on my phone distracts me from improving a few aspects of my wellness. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The phone is a real thing. And look, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I doom scroll all the time too. It's something that we're guilty of. In fact, I'm actually someone had asked me today, like, oh, how's your TikTok stuff going? And the reality is, I haven't been posting as much on TikTok because I don't have I'm trying to restrict my use of TikTok right now to start to build that muscle up. So I will go back to TikTok when I feel like I can actually fight the urge to sit there and scroll for hours. But right now, like the content is just too good. Like it knows I love conspiracy theories and drama, and it puts it right in front of my face, and I can't get away from it. So instead of me using the app, I've told myself I'm just not using the app. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes I break it, but ultimately I try to stay the best. Something that really transformed my relationship with social media, um in my tradition, Kabbalah, we have 18 blessings that we're supposed to say right as we open our eyes every morning, and it's supposed to be the first thing you do. For a while I kept, like, I would wake up, like many of us wake up, we sleep with our phones next to our beds, right? I recommend not doing that. My phone is generally always out of the bedroom while I'm sleeping, or it's far away on the other side of the room, so I can't reach it at night and whatnot. But I would sit on my phone for like 30 minutes to an hour every single morning, and it would destroy my consciousness. Like I would feel negative, I would feel upset, or I'd be like, these people are doing those things, and I want to do that, and this and that. And it just created negative mind movies in my head. So instead, I told myself, you know what? Instead of spending 30 minutes on my phone every morning, I'm going to say prayers of appreciation in place of that, and then do a Duolingo exercise. And literally, that is how I started my morning almost. Not every single morning, of course, there's slip ups, but like that's okay. Life happens. This is not about perfection. This is about excellence, right? And excellence means to constantly improve, whereas perfection means get it right every single time. I don't like that kind of ideology. So at the end of the day, it really helped me to give myself two things that I found really interesting also, but more healthy. And so I started to do that in place of it. So like my suggestion to this person talking about the social media use is there are lots of apps. One app I just downloaded recently was called Nibble, and it's like an education app, but it's designed like a social media network where it's like it's quick, so you can like just I like learned all about like impressionism and like a 5-minute mini lesson instead of scrolling on my phone for 5 minutes. So like it's going to take work. You really have to restrict yourself. And phones have almost become like an organ of the body. So it's a really hard thing to do. But that's why restriction is so important. Restricting negative desires, restricting distracting desires is going to help you get better and better and better at it. And this isn't about saying, oh, I didn't restrict, I'm upset at myself, I'm beating myself up. No, there's no room for that in spirituality. If you fail, you fail. It's okay. It happens. Dust yourself off, get back up and try. Sorry. Sorry, I had to make the reference and you know what I'm saying here. Super. Any questions before I move to the next slide here? Great. So finally, the last step of the peace with process really is what I call right kavanah. Now, kavanah is a word coming from Kabbalah, and what it means is intention or direction. So the first two steps of the peace with process, quantum cause, inspection of desire, is more about our consciousness. What's going on in my brain? Where's my mind at? Right kavanah is now the action, bringing that consciousness into the physical world, bringing the spiritual into the physical world, right? So the first step of right kavanah is you have got to start to slow the mind with simple meditation. This is how you are going to work out that restriction muscle. Because when you sit, even if this is all I'm recommending is 5 minutes, twice or 3 times a week, set a timer, and literally sit with your eyes closed, take 3 deep breaths. I'm speeding up, but you would take them faster. Relax the body. And then after you've taken those 3 deep breaths for 5 minutes, just sit there and on the inhale, count 1, and on the exhale, count 2 to yourself in your mind silently. And just keep doing that for 5 minutes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And if you find your mind drifting off, it's okay. Don't get frustrated. Just be excited. Oh, I realized my mind drifted off. What an amazing thing. I brought bigger consciousness into my life. And now that I have the awareness that my consciousness has gotten off of the task, I just want to bring it right back to that 1, 2. There's no space for frustration, right? Because it's okay, right? Messing up happens. So at the end of the day, starting to do this once or twice a week is going to really help you actually exercise that restriction muscle in your brain. So that's the first thing that you need to do is bring meditation into your life. Number 1. The second piece of this is really starting to sit down and say, okay, when I'm thinking about work-life balance, when I am thinking about this wheel of life and all of these different areas, and I'm also thinking about my value and my purpose, I want to start to marry all of that and create some simple goals for myself to help get me from where I'm at right now to the next step. Now, I'm not suggesting like major goals, right? I'm talking about step by step by step. So if you're experiencing a lot of stress and negativity in the workspace and you want to find a new job that's more aligned with your value and purpose, maybe the first step is actually not to get a new job. Maybe the first step is to, I want to look and just find 3 job descriptions that are a little more aligned and set that goal. And once you've achieved that goal, move on to the next goal, right? Breaking down your goals into smaller goals it helped me tremendously in my process of really figuring out how to start this business and move on with my life, get out of the workspace and start to create my own thing. And then finally, from there, once you've set your cause-driven goals, is don't forget about sharing. Like literally, the only purpose we have here spiritually is to elevate things to their spiritual essence. The best way to do that is to share, is to get outside of the self. It is to find ways to go and help people and make positive changes for other people. So as much as you can, get outside of the self, right? Why? Because this is also making you more happy. Psychologists have studied this. I have the studies. I'm happy to share them with you, where giving and sharing and spending time with people to get outside of yourself actually leads to you having more well-being in your life and more happiness. So are there any questions about taking the spirituality and making it real in our lives? Awesome. So then to just summarize today's, what we've just talked about, right? So the main takeaways for today. The first thing is when we're experiencing an imbalance between work and life, we want to determine if this imbalance is caused by the workplace or if it's caused by me. So what you do in that moment is you use that certainty test. If I answer yes, yes, and yes to all of these questions, then it is more than likely the organization. If I've answered no, 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 then there's more than likely some growth that I need to be doing. Then you move on to quantum cause, right? Really using the wheel of balance to determine what areas in life need more attention and how to take your value and your purpose and align it more with your occupation. From there, in order to start doing that, you've got to keep tabs on your desire. You have got to develop more self-control or self-governance. And so that's why understanding where your desire is, using restriction to get rid of those distracting desires, and then leaning more into those helpful and positive desires as you're moving on. And then finally, right kavana. The meditation is what builds that restriction muscle. Setting those cause-driven goals is what's helping you get closer and closer to your life purpose. And finally, sharing. It just brings more happiness into our lives. So that is what I have for you all this evening. And I will now just open the floor if there are any questions. And if they're not, I just want to say thank you all so much. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, please like, share, and follow this. Of course, head over to peacewith.net to check out all of our offerings. Make sure you're looking at the free education calendar, because every Monday morning I teach or I do a 15-minute motivational call all around spiritual consciousness for the work week at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And every Thursday at 6:15 p.m., I lead a short guided meditation. So that's something to definitely check out also if you're wanting some more stress relief. But without further ado, thank you so much. I'm Abraham Calhoun, the founder of PEACEWITH, and thanks for being part of my mission to bring peace to the workspace.